Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Nir Zook.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here this morning or tonight for me. So, like every year at Ignite, our first Ignite in EMEA this time, but every year at Ignite in the US, I'd like to talk about my vision for cybersecurity and how we see the changes in the industry and what's going on. And one of the things I want to cover today is to talk about how the industry, including our customers and many organizations around the world, are just not ready for what's coming. And to build towards that, Renee already talked about the changing attacker, the adversary is changing. We're not dealing with the same adversary that we think we're dealing with. We're building a lot of systems, we're building processes, and we're building our security operations centers around the assumption that these are the hackers that we're dealing with the hooded, right, 16 years old, that's bored, and on Friday night they don't have anything to do other than hacking you in order to impress their imaginary friends. In other scenarios, we depict the attacker as a foreign national in uniforms because you cannot hack without uniforms and sitting and hacking you. But in reality, these aren't the hackers that we deal with. Again, we assume that these are the hackers that we deal with, and we build everything assuming that's the hacker or that's the adversary that we're dealing with. But in reality, we're dealing with a very, very different adversary today. And to cover that, I'd like to call to the stage one of the friendliest hackers in the world and to talk about that, and then I'll come back and we'll cover what it really means that the adversary is different, what we need to do in order to deal with that. So please welcome Keren Elazari. Hi, Keren.
Thank you, Neil. Thanks so much. Good morning, everybody. It's such a pleasure to be here. And thank you again, Palo Alto Networks, Nir and Renee's team for inviting me to share my ideas about the future of cybersecurity. So as you heard from Nir, I aim to be one of the world's friendliest hackers. I cannot say I'm one of the world's top hackers. I don't think any self-respecting hacker would call themselves that. That's just calling for trouble. But let me tell you a little bit about myself. I grew up wanting to be a hacker. As a kid, that was my aspiration. In fact, growing up in sunny Tel Aviv, almost as beautiful as sunny Amsterdam, I imagined myself becoming a hacker. And no, I didn't wear a hoodie, but I had to sometimes find the answers to all of my questions, as I was a very curious kid. Sometimes those answers would be on other people's computers. What can you do? But very seriously, I did spend a lot of my time at the school library, at home, on my computer. And as this very curious kid imagining herself a hacker, I didn't look like that. I didn't look like this either. I bet you must be imagining something completely different. So let me set the record straight. Here is what I actually looked like growing up in Tel Aviv. This is the actual yearbook photo from my elementary school. And some of you are trying to find me in that picture. It might be a little difficult for you. It's not a trick question. I really did show up to school that day, but that was me. True story. I was so much of a nerd that I looked like a little boy, and even the kids who were playing Dungeons and Dragons would not let me join their team. This is something I have not forgiven them ever since. Thankfully, I had better friends. Some of them were imaginary friends, as Nir mentioned earlier, but some of them were my online friends. I found my way into hacker chat rooms online on the IRC, the Internet Relay Chat Network, and I was talking to people on the other side of the world, learning from them about their hacking skills, copying the scripts. I was a script kiddie. Of course, the people who were speaking to me never imagined that they were speaking to a 13-year-old girl from Tel Aviv. Although I did give them a clue, my first hacker nickname was Acid Burn. Some of you might recognize it because this is the nickname of my hacker mentor, the first woman who showed me the pathway into the hacker's world. I hope you recognize her because her name is Angelina Jolie. In 1995, she portrayed a fierce high school hacker in a Hollywood movie simply called Hackers. I don't know how many of you have seen that film, but for me and many hackers of my generation, that movie, alongside films like Sneakers and War Games, that was one of the reasons for me to choose a life and a career in this field. Because when I saw that film, I realized for the first time that the hackers don't have to be the bad guys. In fact, that group of high school kids, they were the ones who stopped an ecological catastrophe. They uncovered the corporate corruption. They even showed the FBI who the real cyber criminal was. Spoiler alert, he wore a suit and worked for a big corporate. So these were the kids I looked up to. These were the people I wanted to be like. And ever since then, ever since '95, in fact, I've dedicated my life and my career to studying what we can learn from the friendly hackers out there and what we can learn from the criminals as well. I've dedicated my life to looking at what these people have been doing. People that didn't exist in the movies, but real-world people like Barnaby Jack. He was an infamous hacker from New Zealand. He first was interested in hacking ATM machines, but then got fascinated by hacking medical devices. It was Barnaby who first discovered that he could use a radio antenna to remotely trigger an insulin pump, a device like this. These insulin pumps have saved the lives of thousands and hundreds of thousands of diabetic patients all over the world. However, it was only thanks to Barnaby's work that it was revealed that through a radio antenna and the correct signal, a pump like this could be hacked remotely to instantly release any remaining insulin in one single moment into a patient's bloodstream. Catastrophic, lethal. Of course, Barnaby never hurt a fly. When he conducted this demonstration, he had critics saying that this was dangerous, reckless. However, it was Barnaby who said that sometimes it's up to us hackers to demonstrate the threat so that we may spark a solution out there in the world. And I was incredibly inspired by his words. I believe in that message as well. And I think that's why we actually need more and more security researchers and friendly hackers. It was Barnaby who gave me the idea to consider that hackers can sometimes be the immune system for the information age, which is the message I actually shared on the international TED stage just a few years ago. This is an idea that many people have resonated with, and it has been shared worldwide. However, it's not enough. It's not just about getting the help of those friendly hackers. In fact, you might ask, why do we even need an immune system to begin with? Isn't it just the job of security professionals like us, technology companies, and government agencies to make sure that everything is secure? I believe that cybersecurity is actually more of an ecosystem problem, a global problem. As you heard earlier, many of the problems that you face in your countries and your cities are actually universal. They are the same problems that your friends and your competitors or your partners across the pond are dealing with as well. So as we look into that future, I believe that cybersecurity is no longer just about protecting our credit card numbers or our passwords or maybe our Facebook profiles. No, I believe that cybersecurity should be about protecting our way of life. And this means the trust that we place in digital technology, the trust that we place in our elections, in our electricity, in our cars, and everything that we consider a modern society. So how can we get to that future? And what are some of the things we need to know? Well, here are my predictions, if you will, my ideas about the future of cybersecurity. I think, first of all, we have to realize that, unfortunately, the perimeter is dead. Long live the new perimeter, which is everywhere that data lives, whether it's in the cloud, in the endpoint, at the data centers. And the data centers are going to be everywhere. Your customers or the people that you're protecting, they don't care if the data center is located in one country or another. They just want to know that their information is secure. So as security professionals, it's time for us to look beyond these outdated assumptions of endpoint, perimeter, and on-premise devices. More than that, it's time to understand that for the criminals, every digital asset, whether it's in the cloud or in your pocket, will become monetized for criminal gains. What do I mean by that? Well, certainly you've all seen in the past few years that our reality is packed with these out-of-date, end-of-life operating systems. You know, we're coming close on the holiday of Halloween. I thought maybe we should add some ghosts and pumpkins and you know, some scary images next to these, because these are some of the scariest things that keep me up at night, are out-of-date operating systems that we still rely on. Now, some of you here in the room are feeling, well, okay, we're good because we don't use Windows XP or we don't use any of those other systems, Keren. I bet many of you use Windows 7 because 40% of Microsoft machines around the world today are Windows 7. Well, guess what? Windows 7 is going to end of support, that means end of life, in less than 18 months. That means that in 2020, we're going to see attacks against those out-of-date, unpatched Windows 7 machines that are everywhere. In fact, it was exactly that sort of attack, if you remember the Eternal Blue exploit that hit so many computers around the world. This was an attack against unpatched systems, those Windows systems I just mentioned. And we're going to see more of these. If you recall, with Eternal Blue, it was actually part of what made the WannaCry ransomware attack so successful. Now, this attack spread like wildfire. The criminals who launched it didn't care that the people who originally found that exploit worked for the National Security Agency. It doesn't matter for the bad guys where the exploit came from. It only matters that it can be utilized. In fact, just a few weeks after WannaCry, we all had to deal with a new, more devastating attack. However, a lot of people think that WannaCry is in our past. The reason that I bring it up, although it's from 2017, is because just 2 months ago, a company in Taiwan, a company you may have never heard of, the Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, was hit by a variant of WannaCry. That's right, 1 year later, after all the patches have been out, after everybody's heard about WannaCry, it still hit this facility. Now, you may not care about this company, but they happen to be the world's largest dedicated silicon and semiconductor manufacturing facility. That means that whatever they make in that fabrication ends up in your devices, whether they're iPhones or Androids. And when their facility is disrupted by ransomware, it means a global supply chain disruption. In fact, they're going to report $250 million in losses simply because of 3 days of an old, out-of-date ransomware hitting their machines. Just after WannaCry, the world had to deal with a new type of attack. Maybe you know what I'm talking about. This is the wiper-style attacks, like the one that hit a lot of organizations across Europe, not Petya. By the way, this is an actual data center where NotPetya began. Check out their state-of-the-art cooling solution. I had just the same cooling solution in my home when I was 12. However, this is the actual patient zero for NotPetya. This is a small data center belonging to the tax accounting software company in the Ukraine, where NotPetya first started spreading. Now, a very interesting story that not a lot of people will tell you about this is, and this is something I looked into, I researched this because I was curious. Why would all of a sudden, one beautiful Friday in June, this company, this organization will start spreading out wiper attacks all over the world? Well, it turns out that for 2 years, this company, and specifically their software update mechanism, was being used by malicious, state-sponsored cyber attackers who are actually using this company's software updates to push their malicious uploads, their spyware, and specifically their cyber espionage campaigns to companies in the Ukraine and all across Europe. So perhaps one fine Friday morning, they decided after 2 years, it's time to delete all of the evidence. And perhaps that was the true goal of the NotPetya wiper. We may never know. However, these types of attacks are here to stay. In fact, I think it's time to meet the new kid on the block. Shane? No? OK, some people like the Bitcoin joke, some people don't. OK, that's fine. So this is WannaMine, which is a new type of malware that utilizes WannaCry, but built on top of it to create a cryptojacker. That is a type of malware that will use your computer or any type of digital asset to mine for cryptocurrencies. And it actually utilizes 2 tools that you may already know, Eternal Blue, that exploit that we mentioned earlier, and Mimikatz. Mimikatz is a tool that a lot of security researchers know because it is used for harvesting Windows and Microsoft passwords inside Windows environments. In fact, it was originally created by a friendly hacker, a security researcher. However, the criminals just took two existing tools. They took an exploit made by the NSA and a tool made by a security researcher. They put it together, and they bolted on some of these crypto mining capabilities to create WannaMine. In fact, we're going to see more crypto mining attacks in the years to come. So you have to watch out for them. And I'll tell you another story about that later on. However, I want to talk right now about VPN filter, which is another type of attack I don't hear enough people talking about. It was only revealed several months ago. In fact, at Ignite USA was perhaps the first time we discussed it, or people discussed it in the open. VPN filter is an attack that was uncovered by the FBI, and they don't still know exactly what its purposes are. What they do know is that more than 500,000 infrastructure devices around the world have been infected with it. When I say infrastructure devices, I mean routers, small home and office routers, or larger routers. A lot of them were Cisco routers. In fact, the attackers actually used SMI, which is a Cisco interface, a wizard that lets you install Cisco routers. And these attackers, what they built in is capabilities to do absolutely anything. They can use the router to filter or to send encrypted communications, to exfiltrate data out, to send commands in. There's even a variant of VPN filter that specifically looks for industrial control system environments. And one of those variants has been uncovered in a chlorine treatment facility, again, in the Ukraine. So what is VPN filter up to remains to be seen. However, you as security professionals need to get familiar with these types of attacks because the adversaries will use our network infrastructure, and our tools are things like Mimikatz or SMI, tools that we rely on against us. In fact, I absolutely recommend you read this report by the UK's National Cyber Centre. And they were not shy about calling out who they believe is behind this attack. As they say, they believe it is Russian state-sponsored cyber actors. If you have not seen this report, I recommend you read it. There are a lot of technical indicators of compromise in there that you need to look for, especially because this might be happening in your organization. Now, as I saw earlier that Renee was inspired to talk about some of the things I usually go into more detail with, this is Shodan. This is the Google of connected devices, if you will. It was originally created by a very cool guy calling himself Achillean. I believe his mom calls him Alex, but I'm not sure. However, he's not a bad guy. He's a friendly hacker. He's a friendly security researcher. And he created this powerful tool that allows you to scan the World Wide Web and the global internet for connected devices, specifically ones that might have default usernames and passwords or other types of default configurations. This is an incredibly useful tool for security professionals and defenders. If you haven't gone on a Shodan safari yet, I recommend that you do. You would be amazed at what you might discover in your own environment, your home network or your organizational network. However, here's another thing that's happened recently. Some other clever individual took Shodan and he coupled it with another tool, which I hope some of you are familiar with, that's Metasploit. One of the world's most popular exploitation frameworks. This is a tool that any penetration tester knows. It includes the world's biggest library of potential exploits against pretty much any operating system environment or any software environment that you want to attack. So here's what happened. Somebody took Shodan and its massive scanning capabilities and coupled it together with Metasploit's weaponization capability to create this incredible new innovation. Please, drum roll, meet this incredible new tool. It's called Autosploit. And Autosploit is just very simply a combination of Shodan and Metasploit. It was created by VectorSec, who, according to my Twitter conversations with him, is a very ethical, friendly hacker who hopes nobody will use this tool for bad. In fact, if you want to learn about this tool, it is available on GitHub. Hey, I take his words. It's okay. I believe him that he doesn't want anybody to use this for malicious purposes. And he's not going to monitor them for malicious purposes. However, you can find this tool on GitHub. In fact, look at the interface. It is so simple to use. There is absolutely no excuse for security professionals like us not to learn about these tools because the attackers will learn how to use them. And again, they don't care that they were originally created by friendly security researchers. So we have to learn about these tools, because with Autosploit, even a wannabe kid, wannabe hacker like I was, can go from scanning to targeting to exploitation in a matter of minutes, if not seconds. So we have to learn more about that. Now, attackers are going to use more and more types of automation, and it's going to be built into their attacks. In fact, when I'm looking at some of the attacks I've analyzed in the past year, automation is being used by criminals in a scale that we've never before seen, whether it's for the CNC, the command and control, or for data exfiltration, or for the actual malicious activities on the networks. And we'll go into a little bit more details about that soon. But before that, I want to spend a few moments talking about this new adversary of the future. As you heard earlier, this image is actually from the first of its kind competition for computers to hack other computers. This was the DARPA-sponsored Cyber Grand Challenge. And just imagine a big ballroom, bigger than this room, with 7 machines built by humans, by operating completely autonomously and automatically, trying to attack one another by finding vulnerabilities, utilizing and exploiting those vulnerabilities, and defending against those attacks by creating mitigations on the fly. This competition took place in Las Vegas. The winner took home $2 million. And who is the winner, or who was the winner? The winner is the red machine in the middle. Maybe we can see a close-up of it. This is Mayhem. This is the first ever machine to win a hacking competition. I believe it's a part of history. In fact, it is now located in the American History Museum Innovation Wing in Washington, D.C. Second floor next to the ladies' room. I recently went to pay my respects because I believe this is going to be a part of our future. Automations, AIs. This is the first ever system purposely built for cyber defense and exploitation. And we're going to see more of these in the hands of bad guys, and they should be in the hands of defenders like us here in the room. So, taking all that into consideration, here's my question to you. Can we sleep safely in our beds at night doing the same things we did last year or 5 years ago? Isn't it time to adapt our assumptions to evolve? Because the bad guys, they are evolving. They're evolving all the time. And they're going to be using more of these types of attacks, going bigger, going upstream, going to the network infrastructure, using software update mechanisms to get to more and more organizations automatically, spreading like wildfire. They're going to use older and newer operating system exploits and attacks against attacks using fileless techniques, or even attacks using PowerShell and Windows instrumentation or Cisco SMI, tools that we all have in our networks and that we cannot block or blacklist. We're going to see more attacks like that. We're going to see more attacks that will subvert legitimate tools, legitimate security research tools like Shodan and Metasploit. And finally, we'll see more and more automation on a much larger scale than ever before. With this in mind, can we keep doing the same things? I don't think we should. And to learn more about what are the things that you can be doing differently, I'd like to invite Nir back to the stage, and I'll see you later, innovators. Thank you for now. Be back soon.
Thank you, Keren. Okay, thank you, Keren. So we're fighting machines. Okay, the other side, there are machines. And what do we do against the machines? The same thing we've done for the last 20 years. We take a 15, 20-year-old technology called SIEM, we put it in front of human analysts, and we send the human analysts against the machines. Of course, that's not going to work, right? Someone very smart once said, don't bring a human to a machine fight. It just doesn't work. Once machines do something really, really well, there's nothing humans can do about it. I challenge any one of you to win a chess game against the iPhone in my pocket. You won't, okay? Once machines do something well, you don't take humans and try to fight the machines, which is pretty much what everybody today does, both on the industry side and on your side, the customer side. What do? You fight machines with machines. And the point I'm going to make today is that we're not ready for that, and there are things that need to happen in order for us to be able to fight machines with machines. And the first thing we need to talk about is the basic tool for fighting machines with machines, which is analytics, okay? So with analytics is the process of taking data and understanding the data, analyzing the data, understanding the data automatically, coming to conclusions based on the data, and then acting upon these conclusions. And there are various types of analytics. We've been doing analytics for many years. Anyone here that's using Wildfire, which is our service for collecting files from network endpoints, SaaS, and PaaS applications, and figuring out whether the files are malware in the case of applications and weaponized in the case of documents. Once we analyze the file and understand that it is malware, we automatically create prevention measures and then send those prevention measures back to the network, the endpoint, and so on. That's a type of analytics. Actually, Wildfire is replacing what humans, at least within our customer base, used to do for many years, which is chase malware. Chase malware, find new exploits or documents that exploit vulnerabilities, analyzing them manually, coming up with anti-malware signatures and IPS signatures and URL signatures and DNS signatures and so on, and then pushing them manually back to the entire infrastructure. We completely automated that, and we do it within 5 minutes today. Okay, so that's one type of analytics. But most analytics is using something different than that. It's using something called machine learning, or in its marketing term, AI. And in order to explain what it takes to do machine learning / AI, first let me explain what machine learning is, okay? And that's important so that I can then talk about the challenges that we're having with machine learning in the cybersecurity industry. So what is machine learning? The best way to explain what machine learning is through an example. Let's say you want to build a self-driving car, okay? One option you have is you hire hundreds of engineers and you put them in a nice office and you let them write all the rules of how to drive a car, right? If you see a red light, you stop. If you see a green light, you go. If you see a yellow light, you check for police, and then you decide what to do. This is how you turn left, this is how you turn right, and so on. And guess what? You're never going to finish, or they're never going to finish writing the software because there's so many different scenarios that you need to deal with. And even if they did, they would be wrong 1% of the time, which means that the car will be wrong 1% of the time. It's not going to work. A better approach, which is not 100% the approach that the self-driving car companies are taking, so don't try to use this approach on your car at home and expect it to drive by itself, but it's very close. You buy a lot of cars, you equip the cars with all kinds of sensors, visual and sonar and laser and whatever you can get your hands on, and you put humans in the cars and just let them drive. And you let them drive as much as possible in as many different scenarios as possible, and you continuously record everything that the sensors see and what has been the human reaction at the same time in terms of acceleration, braking, steering, and so on. You bring all that data into one place, and then you let machines figure out from that data what are the rules under which you drive a car, okay? And that's actually not very far from what they're doing. So machine learning is really about, rather than humans writing the rules under which a software needs to operate, a piece of software needs to operate, you let machines write the rules under which the software needs to operate based on data. That's what machine learning is about. It's about creating rules based on data rather than humans creating the rules in some magic way, okay? There are two primary types of machine learning, at least two primary types that are relevant today in cybersecurity. The first one is called supervised machine learning, nothing to do really with supervision, but essentially with supervised machine learning, you give the machine two sets of data. One is labeled X and one is labeled Y. One is labeled good, one is labeled bad, one is labeled sick, one is labeled healthy, and so on. And you let the machine figure out the rules for distinguishing between good and bad, or between sick and healthy, or giving something new that's never been seen before, determining, in our case, whether it's good or bad, in the case of healthcare, whether it's sick or healthy, and so on. So the way it works, for example, if you want to teach the machine how to distinguish between malware and non-malware, you give the machine 10 million examples of malware, 10 million examples of non-malware. You have to be very, very accurate about it. You can't have non-malware in the malware and malware in the non-malware. The errors will be amplified, and the machine learning model that yields is going to be not very useful. And you let the machine figure out what are the rules, given a new file that's never been seen before, for determining whether that new file is malware or non-malware. And it works really, really well, okay? It's very limited in terms of the use cases. You can use it to distinguish between malware and non-malware, good URLs, bad URLs, good traffic, bad traffic, good IPs, bad IPs, good domain names, bad domain names, and maybe a couple of other things. That's it. So very useful, very limited use cases. And also important to note is that the biggest difficulty here is on the vendor side. The biggest difficulty here is how do you find 10 million samples of malware that you know for a fact are malware, and how do you find 10 million samples of clean files or non-malware that you know for a fact are non-malware. Once you do that, you create the model, the machine learning predictive model, which is a pretty small file. You send it to your customer base, and you use that to distinguish between malware and non-malware. That's the easy part. The difficult part is how do you come up with a high-quality data set? So that's supervised machine learning. The other type of machine learning is surprisingly called unsupervised machine learning. And with unsupervised machine learning, rather than giving the machine a set of label data, good and bad, blue and white, and so on, you give the machine huge amount of data, and you ask the machine to figure out things about the data. Now, of course, if you haven't taught the machine how to distinguish between good and bad, the machine is not going to distinguish between good and bad. What the machine is probably going to do, or in most cases what the machine can do with unsupervised machine learning, is to find things that just don't fit, find special things. We use clustering technologies to take the data and cluster it into clusters, and then we see what's left outside of the cluster. And in cybersecurity, what's left outside of the cluster is called an anomaly, right? So unsupervised machine learning algorithms in cybersecurity are good at finding anomalies. And the use cases for these are unlimited. There's so many different things you can do with unsupervised machine learning. For example, we have a service called Magnifier, which is a behavioral analytics software, and it uses more than a dozen unsupervised machine learning models just for that in order to identify behavior or behavior that should be attended to by either a machine or by a human. Okay, so this is unsupervised machine learning. The challenge with unsupervised machine learning is that unsupervised machine learning needs tons of data. It needs a huge amount of data, and you don't know a priori which data will be useful and which data is not going to be useful by the machine, so you need to collect a lot of data. And that's very, very different than what most of you are doing today. Today, when you collect data into your, usually SIEM, your Security and Incident Event Manager, you have to, number one, make decisions what you're going to collect and what you're not going to collect. For example, you might collect everything that your firewall can generate, or you might collect only the rules that have been blocked. It's extremely rare that you take each and every system call that happens on each and every of your endpoints and put it into your SIEM. Well, guess what? You need that in order to do unsupervised machine learning. You need to collect everything from all your applications, not just the bad things, not just when an application generates a log that said something went wrong. You have to collect all the actions within the applications, when everything that happens inside applications, whether they are on-premise, in the public cloud, SaaS, has to be collected. Generally, the amount of data that you need to collect for unsupervised machine learning in cybersecurity is about 100 times more than you collect today into your SIEM. Unfortunately, most SIEM vendors price their data collection at about $1 billion per terabyte. Okay, so expect to pay hundreds of millions of dollars in order to collect the amount of data. And by the way, you have to collect it for a long period of time, so expect to collect petabytes and petabytes and petabytes of data. Of course, no one is going to do that. Okay, we need a completely new paradigm to collect the data, store the data, and then we have to collect it into the right data structures that are appropriate for supervised machine learning, unsupervised machine learning, not appropriate necessarily for humans to look at the data. Data that machines need to look at needs to be stored in a very, very different way than data that we expect humans to look at, because they perform different operations. So the world is not ready for unsupervised machine learning, primarily because the amount of data that needs to be collected, the type of data that needs to be collected, and the data structures that they need to be collected to just are very different than what the world is doing today. Okay? So what's needed is a new paradigm for collecting data in cybersecurity so that we can enable machine learning. And when something like that happens, when I see something that needs to happen, something that I know is necessary because the machines are coming, we're fighting machines already. I mean, I know some of you are going to choose to continue to use humans to fight the machines. Good luck. But most of you will want to use machines to fight the machines. And when you see that coming and you see the world not being ready for that, you know that the cybersecurity market is ready for a big disruption. And our disruption, or what we decided to do, or the way we call our disruption, is two simple names. We have the logging service, and we have the application framework. And we'll talk more about those later. But first, I want to call Keren back to stage in order to talk about another aspect that's very, very important in order to understand the disruption that's needed in cybersecurity, and that's how modern attacks happen, okay? So, Keren, please come back to stage and explain to us how modern attacks happen.
I'll explain to you how modern attacks happen. Okay. So, hi, everybody. I love that Nir has this slide up on there because one of the recent attacks I looked at, you may have heard about this one, in fact. This was the, perhaps now becoming famous, aquarium attack. So this actually happened in a casino in North America. They installed a beautiful exotic fish aquarium for the entertainment and enjoyment of their customers. Now, this was a pretty high-profile casino, and they had a very good cybersecurity team. So everything in the casino was very well secured. However, this new, beautiful, smart aquarium had an online thermostat. It had a feature to check the salinity of the water and other features that make sure that the exotic fish are feeling at home. And thankfully, for the criminals, that is, it also had an unsecured outbound internet connection. So while the entire casino and their network was very well secured, this outbound internet connection from the aquarium was actually what the criminals used to exfiltrate 10 terabytes of data from the casino networks, including the information about their whales. That's what they call the high rollers, the big clients of the casino. In fact, this attack was very stealthy and very slow, and it wouldn't easily show up on a lot of the traditional security tools that were at place. In fact, it was only discovered after the fact by a team of human analysts and some new machine learning technologies. This is the sort of attack that only a tool like Magnifier or similar technologies and techniques would be able to identify. Because even a human looking at the network data over long periods of time would have difficulty identifying that this was actually the casino's information being sent out. Now, sometimes the new types of attacks will happen in an even more stealthy and sneaky way. For example, I don't know about you, but who likes coffee? Do you like to enjoy a cup of coffee? I definitely do. Sometimes I even go to one of these very popular American brand coffee stores that they have all over the world. And this particular store, I'll give you a hint, it's one where you usually, first of all, you have to make up a name when you order your half-calf, half-decaf, tall, strong mocha latte on soy milk. So you have to give them a name so that they call you out. The second feature is that all of their stores have free Wi-Fi, anywhere in the world from the Forbidden City in China to Latin America. In fact, in their stores all over Argentina, a security researcher found out that customers' computers were being used to mine cryptocurrencies. This is because people were logging on to the free Wi-Fi, and as they were logging on, the landing page came up. That's the page where you say, I have read and accepted the terms of use, which is also the biggest lie on the internet. However, after you sign that, your computer kind of wobbles for a couple seconds. This is exactly what CoinHive used. CoinHive is the script that was actually running on people's computers, mining for cryptocurrencies. Now, CoinHive wasn't actually created by criminals. There is a company behind CoinHive, and they claim they have invented a new business model, an innovative way to monetize your business with your users' CPU power. Now, you might think this is completely crazy. However, a very popular website here in Europe has been using this technique, perhaps even your personal computers, to mine for cryptocurrencies. Perhaps some of you have heard about this website. It's actually called the Pirate Bay. I hear it's quite popular here in the Netherlands and all across the world. In fact, the Pirate Bay has millions of users every day, millions of active users. So every time your computer, your browser, is visiting that site, for several times in the past year, the site was using your computer to mine for cryptocurrencies. Specifically, we're talking about a cryptocurrency called Monero, which is an alternative currency, which is considered even more stealthy or harder to track down than Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies. Again, the creators of Monero don't consider it to be criminal. However, we're going to see more of these types of attacks. And they won't just happen in the coffee shop or on your computers. They can happen on much more powerful computers. So take, for example, this very powerful, very innovative car company. In fact, you may have driven or were in a taxi that's one of these cars on your way over here this morning. So this innovative company that does a lot of great security things, they also have an amazing, they use the cloud, and they have a lot of computing power, for example, on their AWS, on their Amazon Web Services instances. Recently, attackers were able to subvert their Kubernetes instances. Kubernetes is a tool that's used to manage containers and cloud instances. The attackers were able to get on this very powerful cloud belonging to this very innovative company. Did they use it to steer autonomous vehicles or to put out crazy tweets about occupying Mars? No. They actually used it, once again, for mining cryptocurrencies. So this classic attack is becoming a fast favorite for criminals. You have to watch out for crypto miners. However, it doesn't end there. As you know, a lot of companies are moving to the cloud. Probably your organization is already adopting cloud computing in a variety of ways, sometimes ways that the security team only finds out about after the fact. Case in point, a very popular ride-sharing company. Again, you may have ridden in one of their rides this morning. They've used the cloud a lot of big companies do. And it turns out some of their developers actually kept hard-coded passwords to their cloud instances, to their Amazon instances. And they kept some of these hard-coded passwords in their GitHub profiles. And that meant that the criminals were very easily able to get access. In fact, if you heard about big data breaches at companies like this one, it may have something to do with that sort of activity. That means that in order to protect against these attacks, security professionals have to come up with new ways to monitor the way developers are going to be using the cloud. It's not just about baking security into the product and the design and the architecture. It's also about monitoring the DevOps and the way development, the way engineers will use cloud instances. Of course, this is maybe old news to you. So what about some more interesting news? Recently, we heard from the FBI that they were able to indict, that means trying to bring to justice, a member of the Lazarus group. The infamous Lazarus group is the group attributed with North Korea. And this is a group of attackers that has also been called a factory of malware, because of how much they create new types of attacks using malware and how many tools they have in their arsenal, just like a Swiss knife. Specifically, when the Lazarus group attacked the SWIFT infrastructure, when they went after banks around the world to conduct some fraudulent SWIFT wire transfers, they knew that it would not be easy. So instead of attacking the SWIFT servers directly, they actually did something very sneaky and very clever. One of the first things they did was actually hack the websites of financial authorities in several countries. Specifically, this is the website of the Polish National Authority. Now, this is a website that doesn't have a lot of functionality on it, doesn't have any transactions on it. However, it's a website that displays information like mortgage rates, interest rates, exchange rates. And the attackers, the Lazarus team, they knew for a fact that the people who work in their target organizations, that means banks all across Europe and in Poland specifically, those people will visit this website. Once a day, once a week, who knows? They'll definitely visit this site. So they used it, a watering hole attack, to use this site as one place where they can target launching malicious payload into the browsers that visit it. They didn't just do it in Poland. They actually did it in 8 other countries across Europe. And once they got into those banks' organizational networks, that's when they moved laterally to go ahead and try and get to those SWIFT servers. In fact, the way North Korean attackers work is very sophisticated. Here's an analysis of another North Korean piece of malware. Specifically, this analysis was done by a friend of mine, a security researcher called Amit Serper. You can find him online as OX Amit. I recommend following his work. What he did was reverse engineer, analyze this North Korean malware. And what you can see on the left is that the malware already includes a tool to brute force for popular password options. So it already includes, baked in, a lot of the most popular passwords. So once this malware is inside the network, specifically, it could try to get its way onto network infrastructure devices and other privileged accounts. It doesn't require any interaction on the side of the adversaries. The malware can move on its own, if you will. It doesn't end there. Attackers like this group and other groups, they will do whatever they can to get their hands on their target, the crown jewels. So just recently at the Bank of Chile, again in Latin America, one of the biggest banks in the region, the Bank of Chile, had a devastating wiper attack. Imagine you get up in the morning, you're a bank employee, you walk up to your computer, and this is what it looks like. This is because your master boot record has been destroyed by a wiper. 9,000 computers and 500 servers destroyed overnight. The security team and the IT team is rushing around trying to figure out what's the source of the wiper, how to stop it. Is it a ransomware attack? Should we pay anybody? How can we get our files back? How can we make sure that our bank is still running, that people are not scared, that their money is safe? However, while everybody is running around dealing with that wiper attack, the attackers are actually on the Swift servers launching their fraudulent Swift transactions quietly and stealthily. So while everybody was busy looking at what was happening over here, they were stealing millions of dollars. Just like the Ocean's 11 film criminals, they create a big distraction while they're actually stealing your crown jewels. A lot of the times, a wiper attack is not just a wiper. There's usually going to be something else behind it. This is another one of the characteristics of the modern types of attacks that we're seeing. What else is going on? Well, attackers will look at your organization, and if they can't find the window, if they can't find the back door, they will create one. In fact, this is happening more and more, and you have to think like the attackers will, because they know that you and your team and your users are making hundreds of security decisions every day. And they only need you to be wrong once, to make the wrong decision once. But it's not just you and your users who are making these security decisions. It's your technology. It's your infrastructure. It's your network devices and your endpoints and your cloud instances that are making thousands of security decisions every day. So it's time to empower them to make better decisions faster. That's why I believe machine learning, algorithms, analytics, that is absolutely going to be a part of our future. And we have to make that a part of our future if we want to stay ahead of the game. However, that's not the whole story. If you look at the big picture of cybersecurity, the way I believe it is, maybe 60%, 70%, 80% of it we can put down to science, metrics, automation, computers that will make some of our decisions for us. However, at the end of the day, we are always going to have that 20% or 30%, which is the art of security, which is the top of the pyramid. And that's the threat hunting, that's the incident response, that's threat intelligence, reverse engineering, looking at malware, looking at attacks. And that is the stuff that I believe is going to require more humans than ever before. And we need to empower those humans to make better decisions and to do smarter things with the technology that they already have. In order to do these things, I believe it's time we all must embrace the hacker mindset. Because if you think about reverse engineering, if you think about threat hunting, if you think about intelligence, this is exactly the sort of thing that hackers are perfect at. Learning your network, understanding it, and finding the vulnerabilities. And that's the type of mindset I believe we should all have. And not just us here in the room. You may have heard recently, a lot of people are talking about the skill shortage and the human resource crisis. Our industry needs more people. I believe it needs more hackers. Where are these hackers going to come from? Well, hopefully, I think some of these hackers are going to be kids. Specifically, some of them might actually come from the Girl Scouts organization. You may have heard that Palo Alto Networks has a program with the United States Girl Scouts organization to train girls on cybersecurity skills. And I believe that's phenomenal because that's the sort of talent and diversity that we also will need in our future. In fact, when I go to the world's largest convention of hackers, when I go to DEF CON, I don't see 30,000 criminals. I see 30,000 creative, curious, innovative individuals. I also see kids. I see kids who came there with their parents to learn on how to be a hacker for good. So if you have kids, now is the time to train them to be the next generation of cybersecurity defenders. And in order for them to be successful, in order for all of us to be successful in protecting the future and creating safer environments for everybody, we have to understand that technology will be a part of it. But we should not let our future be defined by our battles with technology or our conflicts and our mistrust, but rather let us define our future by how we can use technology to create a safer alternative for everybody. I hope that you feel the same way, but the choice to do that choice will begin here today with you. And in order to learn about how you can make that choice happen and what that means when you come back to the office next week after this event, I'll invite Nir back to teach you about some of the things you can do together. Once again, I'm Keren Elazari, and I want to thank you for your attention today. Thank you.
Thank you, Keren.
Sayonara.
Thank you, Keren. So you've seen some examples of attacks where the attacks were really across the entire infrastructure, right? A SaaS application, GitHub gets hacked, password is stolen in order to go into the public cloud and run things there. Luckily, in this case, they were just trying to run crypto mining, but they could have run whatever they wanted or get into whatever they wanted and do whatever they wanted in that public cloud application. And it happens more and more that attacks are spawning across the entire infrastructure and involve many different things: SaaS applications, PaaS applications, public clouds, private clouds, data centers, user endpoints, of course, servers and IoTs, and so on. And that requires a different thinking. So it's not that we just need to fight the machines with the machines. We need to enable the machines on our side to collect data from the entire infrastructure and then go and find attacks using that entire data set from across the entire infrastructure, because, again, the attacks happen in the entire infrastructure. And then once an attack has been found, the response has to go back to the entire infrastructure in order to either stop the attack or prevent a future similar attack, whatever is possible. And given that, I always ask customers, anyone here has an EDR project? EDR? Yes? Just one? Nobody in Europe is doing EDR? That's actually good. So EDR, I mean, I know you do, and you know that I'm going to tell you that it's not the smartest thing to do, which is why you're not, admitting that you have an EDR project. But EDR is one of the stupidest things I ever heard about, because think about what EDR, endpoint detection is response is. We're going to collect data from endpoints, just endpoints, by the way, mostly just user endpoints, and we're going to put our best security talent in front of that data, whether it's ours or we outsource it somewhere else, and we're going to have them use just endpoint data to go and look for attacks. Which of the attacks that Keren described do you think you're going to find using that? None. Now, in which parallel universe does it make sense to limit yourself to collecting data just from endpoints and putting your best resources just on that data, ignoring data from the network, ignoring data from SaaS applications, ignoring data from PaaS applications, ignoring data from your own applications, ignoring data from email, ignoring data from the rest of your infrastructure? It just doesn't. So why are we doing it? I don't know, maybe we read somewhere that we need to do EDR, maybe some vendor came in and had a good presentation. It just doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense anymore, especially when you want to enable machines to fight machines, to limit yourself, whatever it is that you do, to just network or just endpoint or just even parts of the network. You know, we need a different mindset. We need to change the mindset of how we approach cybersecurity, where the architecture for cybersecurity needs to be more in the form of, we have a layer of sensors, and these are the names that we gave to these sensors, right? We have a physical firewall and a virtual firewall and our endpoint product called Traps, and we have Global Protect Cloud Service, which is a cloud-delivered firewall if you are too lazy to deploy your own firewall. No, I'm kidding. I mean, it has a lot of use cases. And Aperture, which is our SaaS security, and Evident, which is now together with Redlock, is our pass security agent. And you have those agents collecting data and collecting them into a central location. And then in the central location, you have many different applications, a few of them depicted here, that use that data in order to do whatever it is that they do, and then respond back to the infrastructure, okay? And that, as I said, requires a very, very different mindset. It requires to have a uniform layer here on the bottom of products that work together, collect data together into one place, and then have an application mindset on top of that. And maybe before explaining what the mindset that's required in cybersecurity and how it's very, very different than the mindset that we all have today, I'll give you an example that I think is going to make it a little bit clearer. And that example is the Apple iOS ecosystem. So in the Apple ecosystem, if you think about it, when you bought iPhone 1, and by the way, the Google Android ecosystem is very similar to this. When you bought iPhone 1, it was mostly a phone. It had music capabilities. It had a camera on it, not the best camera in the world. I think it was 2 megapixel, no GPS for geolocation, and so on. You used it mostly as a phone. But then over time, you bought more and more sophisticated devices and different devices to a point where today, it's really not about the device. Today, it's about the service that you consume on the device. So each one of us is choosing their own music service, right? You have Apple Music, and you have Amazon Prime Music, and Pandora, and a few others. And then you choose your photo service, and you choose your movie service, and you choose your TV service, and you choose your navigation service, and you choose your news service, and magazine service, and email service, and so on. And you consume it on the devices, on these devices. And if you think about it, you don't spend that much time figuring out what's your next device, right? When Apple announces their next device, and Samsung and LG and all these other companies announce their next device, yeah, I will take a look at them, probably stay with the same manufacturer that I am right now, and just buy the newer device. Maybe I'll switch, but I spend maybe 5-10 minutes thinking about what's my next device. Whereas I spend a lot of time figuring out which music service I want to use, and which photo service I want to use, and which movies service I want to use, and so on. And it's really about the services. It's really about this layer. It's really about the applications. It's not about, or the services. It's not about the layer in the bottom, okay? And you can consume all these different services in different form factors, right? A phone, and many of them run on a watch, and you can TV, and HomePod, and a tablet, and a computer, and a browser, and in your car. And they're all the same services. And it's really about the services. And what I think we need to do is we need to have the same mindset in cybersecurity. The mindset that we need in cybersecurity is a mindset where we have a lot of sensors, but those sensors don't matter. We need them. They are required in order to consume the services. And those sensors are the firewalls and the endpoints. And we just need one of them. We just need one of them in every location, just one firewall in every location, physical and virtual, and one agent on every endpoint, and one agent in every public cloud, and one thing looking at our SaaS applications, and maybe a few others. But then it's all about the services. It's all about outcomes. It's all about what we really need from cybersecurity. What I mean by that is that nobody needs a firewall, and nobody needs endpoint. They're just means for achieving compliance, and achieving reporting, and visibility, and detection and response, and prevention, and lower level stuff like behavior analytics, and sandboxing, and all the other things that we want to do in cybersecurity. But they're just a mean to achieve those. They're not the thing that we need to focus on. Yet, that's really what we focus on today. We are spending more than 90% of our energy on figuring out what's going to be our next internet gateway firewall. And then we forget about it because now we have a data center firewall project. And let's take people and throw them and test everything in the market and figure out what's the best data center firewall. And then what's the best virtual firewall, and what's the best endpoint, and what's the best CASB, and what's the best pass security, and what's the best email security, and so on, where they just don't matter. They're not going to help you fight a machine. They're just going to make things more complicated. What we really need to focus on are the outcomes. We need to focus on what's the best visibility service I can get, what is the best compliance service I can get? What is the best detection and response service I can get? What is the best prevention service I can get? And so on. And then all these things that you today spend your time on, they're just a mean to consume these services. They're not important, okay? And once we do that, we can start fighting the machines. Once we do that, everything becomes so much easier. And the reason everything becomes so much easier because all of a sudden we don't have the split brain issue where we have a brain for endpoint, like EDR, for example, and then we have a completely different set of products or technologies working on network traffic, like network behavior analytics, and then we put a completely different set of technologies looking at user data, like user behavior analytics, and we put a completely different set of products on different areas of the infrastructure, like SaaS applications and PaaS applications and so on. And each product is only limited to the data that it can collect from the very little silo in our infrastructure that it's running in, rather than looking at the entire data set, everything, where attacks really happen, right, across the entire infrastructure, and working with one brain. So that's one thing. The second thing is the bad guys, the adversaries, are moving really, really fast. They innovate all the time. And in many cases, when they come up with a new innovation, we respond to that new innovation with a signature. Very easy. You get it very quickly. Sometimes just requires a little software upgrade on one of the existing products that you have. You know, probably in 3 months you'll get that. That's not fast enough, but maybe. But in many cases, not in many cases, but too often, you need a completely new technology in order to deal with something new that the adversaries came up with. That's why you have 100 different products running in your infrastructure. Because there was a new problem, none of your existing products solved it, then you had to go and look for a new product. And it usually took you a year, right? It takes about a year. It takes about a year to evaluate new technology, procure the new technology, deploy the new technology, operationalize the new technology. You don't have a year. You don't have a year. When the bad guys come up with something new, you have minutes, hours, maybe days. You don't have a year. If we switch to a model where the infrastructure doesn't change, we don't deploy anything in the infrastructure, we already have one thing in every network, and one thing on every endpoint, and one thing in every cloud, and one thing on every, looking at our SaaS applications, and so on, that doesn't change, then consuming a new service is just a matter of flicking a switch, okay? And if it's built the right way, the consumption of that service and the operationalization of that service can happen in a matter of minutes and hours, not in a matter of a year. And that's becoming more and more important as we deal with an automated, very innovative adversary. And I would like to finish my presentation today with a challenge to you, at least for the CIOs and the CISOs here in the audience. Challenge your teams to find a way to build or to create a cybersecurity architecture where when there is a new challenge that you need to deal with from the adversary side, it will not take a year to choose, deploy, and operationalize a new solution. Challenge your team to get to a point where it takes them maybe an hour or two to respond to any challenge from the adversary side, okay? The evaluation, the deployment, the operationalization of a new technology that needs to fight something new coming from the adversary side needs to happen in a matter of hours, not a matter of months and years. And that's something I think that if at least some of you go out of this conference and challenge your teams to move towards an architecture that enables that, the world is going to be a safer place. The other challenge that you should challenge your team is when they do that, not to hire more people. How do you consume more and more cybersecurity technology, again, in a matter of hours, without requiring you to hire new people? Because you know the cycle today, right? There's a new cybersecurity challenge. You go and buy new products. The next week, the team comes to you and says, I need more people. Then you buy more, you hire more people, and the cycle continues. We have to break that. And if there's one thing I want you to come out of this conference with is challenge your teams to change that. Challenge your teams, again, to create an infrastructure, create an architecture that can consume new cybersecurity technology in a matter of hours without needing more people, okay? Good luck with that. Thank you.